Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters, your Magic the Gathering source that helps you command your budget. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all their support. There's even a brand new Brigadier General tier where you can get a shout out on a Commander's Quarters episode that's dedicated to you. Hey everyone, Mitch coming in from the Commander's Quarters studio. Welcome to the show. So day one of spoiler season, Innistrad Crimson Vow is coming to a close. And what an exciting day one it's been. I mean, we've got a brand new mechanic with Cleave and what is potentially a new Commander staple with the card that we're seeing it on with Dig Up. So yeah, if you haven't seen that episode, make sure you check it out at some point, but not just yet. And also, not just yet, but still check out my other episode on Olivia Crimson Bride. Olivia is back and better than ever, but please, stick around for this episode first, because on this episode, I can tell you right now, we've got an incredibly spicy new commander, and I'm asking the question, is this Gitrog's brother? I mean, it kind of looks like Gitrog. It's even got like the arm in the mouth like Gitrog. And it kind of works a little bit like Gitrog, but you know what? Let's jump into this commander, and I'll let you decide if this is truly Gitrog's brother, and you know what? If this is a commander that you are interested in. So, Grolnok, the Omnivore, which is a fantastic name, is a 3/3 frog that costs 2 green-blue. Grolnok has, whenever a frog you control attacks, mill 3 cards. That's right, Frog Tribal. Maybe. We'll talk about that here in a bit. Anyways, whenever a permanent card is put into your graveyard from your library, exile it with a Croak counter on it. You may play lands and cast spells from among cards you own in exile with Croak counters on them. So I think this is actually kind of one of those commanders that actually throws you off a little bit, because if you read that first part and you're like, okay, whenever a frog you control attacks, mill 3 cards, oh, I don't want to build Frog Tribal. I'm just not even going to, look at this commander a second time. I am telling you right now that this commander would be pretty much just as effective and be completely fine if it literally just said, whenever it attacks, mill 3 cards, instead of, whenever a frog attacks. Obviously, saying frog attacks is better because it applies to a wider variety of potential creatures that you have. But again, I think that just throws people kind of off the trail of this commander. This is actually quite a powerful commander. I mean, literally, the amount of value that this commander can give you is pretty absurd. It's kind of like a Muldrotha-style commander that works in a different way. Whereas Muldrotha lets you play out of your graveyard, this essentially gives you a separate kind of pile of cards outside of your graveyard, again, exiling those cards with Croak counters on them. So, in a way, it's kind of more protected in that, you're not really ever gonna lose access to those cards. I mean, granted, okay, as long as you've got Grolnok in play. Same with Muldrotha, though. I mean, when a card is in exile, essentially your opponents pretty much can't touch it. I mean, okay, unless your opponent, for whatever reason, is running Ingest Tribal. Yeah, you remember that really terrible mechanic? No one runs that, so yeah, your cards in exile are incredibly safe. So a deck built around this, again, with just basically a bunch of permanents that mill you, that essentially becomes card draw. Mill equals card draw, and yeah, just even with attacking with this commander too, you're milling 3, and again, that's essentially draw 3 as long as you're hitting all permanents. And being able to play lands with Croak counters on them is huge. I mean, you're going to be hitting your land drops incredibly consistently with this, and of course, there's some other things that you can do with this to make that even more impactful. So yeah, let's walk through why you should kind of look past that first part, where this is not a Frog Tribal commander. This is a commander that is an incredible value engine for you. So let's jump into the numbers. And actually keep in mind with this quick take and essentially all my other quick takes, if I make any mistakes in this episode or misspeak or don't bring up the right cards, my apologies. These cards are just as new to me as they are to you, and I'm trying to put these episodes out in a timely fashion. So Yeah, please just bear with me and let's move forward. So, out of curiosity, I looked up to see exactly how many frogs there were in this color combination, and as you can see, there are 22. So, yeah, not all that supported of a tribe. And I even sorted this by EDH Rec rank, which again, isn't the end-all be-all for, how good a card is in Commander. But as you can see at the top of that, we got Spore Frog, which, yeah, is awesome. But then after that, we've got, I don't even know what we've got. Just miscellaneous frogs that might be good in very specific decks, but not good enough on their own to be like, hey, I'm just going to run, a tribal frog deck and it's going to work out. No, it's not. Now, you might be also thinking, well, I can also run changelings, and yes, that is true, okay? Changelings are technically frogs, they're technically every other creature type too, alright? And with a quick search as well in these colors, you can see that there are exactly 20 changelings in these colors as well, so there you go. I guess literally if you wanted to run a completely frog tribal deck built around this commander, you could. You put, these 20 plus the 22 frogs, and you've got 42 miscellaneous frogs that do a wide variety of things, and cool, you can mill yourself and get more frogs out, and you're probably not gonna do really all that much in the game. Okay, now I guess I'm sorry, I should not be all that down on players who actually want to build Frog Tribal. Go for it. And you know what? You very well might beat me in a game, and that would be really cool. Regardless, again, I think my point is that most players won't want to build Frog Tribal around this commander, and therefore will just see that, they think it's a Frog Tribal commander and completely dismiss it, and they should not, because of these upcoming awesome cards that you should be considering when building around Grolnok. First up, the way that I would build this deck is pretty much the entire deck has all permanents in it, because then milling essentially just equals card advantage. So yeah, much like many Muldrotha builds, if you include all permanents in it, if you've got, permanents in your graveyard, or in this case, permanents in exile with crow counters on them, that's just extra value. So yeah, I'd run a ton of mill cards, including Codex Shredder, Perpetual Timepiece, and Jace's Eraser. Codex Shredder can tap and make target player mill a card. Perpetual Timepiece does the exact same thing, but it's 2 cards, and Jace's Eraser has, whenever you draw a card, you may have target player put the top card of the library in their graveyard. Basically, draw, mill 1. So again, as long as your commander is in play, these are essentially draw engines for this deck, which is pretty absurd. Speaking of absurd, let's talk about some creatures that can help us mill as well, things like Milliken, Hedron Crab, and Fleet Swallower. Milliken is a mana dork that can tap to mill a card and add a colorless, and again, basically just ramping us and helping us get card advantage. Yeah, that's gonna be pretty fantastic with this commander. Speaking of which, we've got the 1-mana Hedron Crab that has landfall. Whenever land enters the battlefield under your control, target player mills 3. So again, with this commander, this works pretty perfectly. Again, thanks to our commander, we can play lands with croak counters on them, and by doing so, we get a trigger off of Hedron Crab to mill ourselves for more, getting more lands with more croak counters on them, to then mill further, and we'll talk about other landfall synergies here in a bit. Regardless, one massive synergy comes from Fleet Swallower, which has, when it attacks, target player puts the top half of their library rounded up into their graveyard. Hi, yes, would you like half of your library exiled with croak counters on them so that you've got access to all those cards? Awesome! Have fun. And would you also like with this Merrick Orb to just, mill yourself whenever you happen to untap anything? It says whenever a permanent becomes untapped, that permanent's controller mills a card. Yeah, this can mill you incredibly quickly. I mean, untapping lands even now just mills you, which again just basically generates card advantage when your commander's in play, and that's pretty absurd. And of course, if you've got anything that can say untap itself, like, a Phaedo Alchemist or something like that, then you can just go infinite with this. I mean, you probably wouldn't want to go exactly infinite unless you've got a way to win by having no library, but you can basically just mill yourself as much as you want to. Regardless, let's move on and talk about another synergy that I alluded to. And that would be the amount of value that this commander can give to you by giving you access to lands. So make sure you're making the most out of those lands like a good Simic player does with things like Wayward Swordtooth, Azusa, and AC. Wayward Swordtooth has Ascend, and it says you may play an additional land on each of your turns, and it can't attack or block unless you've got the City's Blessing, but yeah, you're gonna get there really quickly. So yeah, a 5/5 that lets you play an extra land, and it's just 3 mana. Sign me up. And then Azusa Lost But Seeking is even more absurd, letting you play 2 additional lands on each of your turns. Again, with consistent mill cards and being able to just get a ton of lands and exile with crow counters on them, you can get way ahead of your opponents with this in no time. And then AC Timer the Gyre Strait might only let you play one additional land on each of your turns, and again, one is still a lot, but not as much as Azusa, but it also says whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may draw a card. So yeah, extra lands and card advantage with lands, quite simic, huh? But yeah, make sure you're making the most out of all those lands that you're going to have with Croak counters on them. And you can, of course, also take advantage of all those lanes you're going to be playing with landfall triggers with things like Lotus Cobra, Rampaging Balos, and Scoot Swarm. Lotus Cobra says whenever a land enters the battlefield under control, add 1 mana of any color. So yeah, extra free mana, what's not to like? And speaking of what's not to like, Rampaging Balos says whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may create a 4/4 green beast creature token. So, Beast Army in no time. And speaking of an army in no time, Scoot Swarm says whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, create a 1/1 green insect creature token, but if you control 6 or more lands, which you're going to, come on, you're in Simic, create a token that's a copy of Scoot Swarm instead. So when that happens, that basically becomes a multiplying factor where you get, 2 Scoot Swarms, then 4, then 8. And you can see where that's going. But actually, these aren't the only ways that we can make tokens, and in fact, a really good one that you're going to want to consider for this deck is Desecrated Tomb. Desecrated Tomb says whenever one or more creature cards leave your graveyard, create a 1/1 black bat creature token with flying. Again, whenever one of your creatures is put in your graveyard from your library, Grolnok is going to exile it with a Croak counter on it. Since it hit your graveyard, then got exiled, in other words, it left your graveyard, Desecrated Tomb is going to see that and then give you a token. So essentially with this in your commander in play, whenever you mill into creature cards, you're getting tokens because of that. And actually, although I did say that this is probably not most effective as a Frog Tribal deck, with these tokens, you can do some pretty funny things. Like, play Arcane Adaptation or Xenograft. Arcane Adaptation says, as it enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Creatures you control are the chosen type in addition to the other types. The same is true for creature spells you control and creature cards you own that aren't on the battlefield. And Xenograft basically does the exact same thing, but not that last part. Regardless, the part that really matters is that your creatures in play are frogs, because now when any of your creatures attack, you're gonna mill 3 cards per each frog that is attacking. So again, in combination with, again, something like Desecrated Tomb, you're gonna swing with your bat frogs, because that's a horrifying thing now. Regardless, you swing with them, for each of them you mill 3, then for each creature you hit off of that, you're also exiling it with a Croak counter on it, making more tokens, and you see where this is going. A ton of mill, a ton of creature tokens, and yes, now you can call it Frog Tribal, I guess, if you have one of these in play. And of course, with all of this self-mill, if you really want to, you can do that Lab Maniac win if you feel like doing that, because, you can probably mill yourself pretty quickly with a deck like this. Lab Maniac has, if you draw a card while your library has no cards in it, you win the game instead. And yes, I also could include right here Thassa's Oracle, as well as Jace Wielder Mysteries. The Lab Man win, okay? Regardless, though, now that I've talked about cards that can work really well with this commander, what other commanders might want it in the 99 of their decks? Now, a commander that might want Grolnok in the 99 of their deck might be Sidisi Brood Tyrant, and actually I do want to make a note here. It's gonna be tricky to find out exactly what kinds of decks really want Grolnok. Real quick though, Sidisi has when she enters the battlefield or attacks, mill 3. And then whenever one or more creature cards are put in your graveyard from your library, put a 2/2 black zombie creature token on the battlefield. So, mill, make tokens, and also if you've got, Grolnok in play, mill and get some card advantage. Again though, really consider if you want Grolnok in a deck, because it is exiling cards with Croak counters on them, and if you, say, permanently lose Grolnok, well, you just lost all those cards instead of them being in your graveyard, which decks generally have an easier time to get those cards back if they're a self-built deck. So yeah, maybe another self-mill commander like Tasker the Golden Fang might want to utilize Grolnok, but again, it really depends on the deck and the build, and if you're willing to take a little risk in permanently losing some things if Grolnok is, completely dealt with. Regardless, don't let this frog fool you. It is not a Frog Tribal commander. It is an extremely value-centric commander that, well, can get pretty absurd pretty quickly. So just get some repeatable mill effects in play, mill yourself, get those cards in exile with Croak counters on them, cast them, play additional lands, do Simic things, have fun. And most importantly, when you find out what Grolnok's relationship, or not being related at all to the Gitrog monster, is, please let me know. And with that, the show is coming to a close, so it's my turn to hear from you. So the comments below, let me know what your thoughts on this episode are, and as always, thanks again, and have a good one.